Live from the Average Joe Nation studios in St. Clair, Missouri. This is the Average Joe Podcast, a show that proves that in this crazy world, a combination of common sense and a C-plus average is actually a superpower. Sure, he's crazy, but what if he's right? Please welcome your host, Damon Gilbert.
All right, here we are again. Once again, thank you for listening. I want to first explain something before we get into this because we got a lot to talk about today. It's a pretty deep subject, so it's Ukraine and Russia and that kind of thing. But what I wanted to do first of all, before I do anything else, is to explain to you, I don't want people to think that I believe I'm smarter than anyone else, because I'm not. Believe me. Out of all the people you'll meet, I am not the smartest. Believe me. I am not, I have no diploma on the wall other than a high school diploma in a drawer somewhere. That's all I've got. And a little bit of smarts. That's about it. It doesn't make me smarter than you. It really doesn't. I want to make that perfectly clear, that I am not trying to take the higher road like I'm sharper than the rest of you. You listen to this so that you get some information that you may have not learned from someone else, or maybe a perspective you had not thought of before. That's all I'm asking. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear on that, because I don't want, you've met people who think they're smarter than everyone else. You've met them. They're all over the place. I'm not that guy. I'll be the first one to admit that I'm wrong, and I'll be this first one to go, didn't know this, didn't know that. That's a great point, So I want to make sure I'm clear on that. I don't want to put myself up on some high pedestal like I'm smarter than everybody else. And what I will compare that to is, or explain that, is because, if you're not a mechanic, okay, you may know a little about cars, but not a lot. So you go to a mechanic. Why do you go to the mechanic? That's kind of his realm. That's what he does. There are people I know that I would never, ever, under any circumstances, argue about baseball, any sports, maybe guns, it's what they do, okay? So for me I could have a different perspective. If they say something about the Boston Red Sox or the St. Louis Cardinals, I can say, well, that's true, but on the other hand, look at this. It's all perspective, right? And people get kind of tribalistic when it comes to sports, but nonetheless, there are people out there who are very, very intelligent, and they know the stats and they can read them off quickly. That's because that's something they enjoy. Having said that, that's why I feel that I know a little bit more. I delve into some of this stuff when most people don't have time to do that. So that may be one of the reasons you come and listen. You say, hey, this guy's got a different perspective. He may have seen some news stories that I have not seen, that kind of thing. Doesn't mean you have to agree with me by any stretch of the imagination, okay? So I want to make that perfectly clear up front. Having said that, I've got something I want to talk to today, and it's about the Ukraine and conflict, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I don't have the answers. I thought I did. I think that was a little tongue-in-cheek. I really don't have the answers. But I do understand the circumstances a little bit better now. And I see where it's kind of scary where this is all going, because there's a lot of hyperbole out there right now, okay? End of the world kind of stuff, apocalyptic. I mean, you've got people endorsing nuclear war right now. In Europe and in the United States, we're talking about all kinds of different things that are just 6 months ago we would have never even thought of, right? At that point, where we were still into the pandemic, which apparently has been, I don't know, I guess it's gone. I don't know if there was an official announcement, but we're talking about maybe ending the emergency, what was it? Emergency Act that Biden signed that gave him pretty much latitude over everything, unparalleled actually. I mean, it's kind of like the Patriot Act. Right after 9/11, we signed the Patriot Act, which gave Intel any kind of. They were so afraid of the Muslims, okay, radical Islam. They were so afraid of that. That's kind of, you remember those days, right? Depending on how old you are, of course, but I mean, you remember those days. Right after 9/11, we were scared. We thought there was a terrorist behind every bush. We really did. And that's what we told everybody, that there is, in fact, a terrorist behind every bush. Turns out that wasn't true. Because if you do the math, if that was the case, we should have had, if you take the amount of Muslims there are in the world, and I'm going to go through this real quick because I do want to get to the rest of my story, but in order to hook these two up to give you an idea where we stand, I have to explain this. There's over a billion Muslims in the world. Well, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that 10% are radical, okay? 10%, okay? That's a lot of Muslims. You know, I mean, that's, what, 100 million? That's 100 million? 100 million radicals around the world, not just in Saudi Arabia and Afghanistan. No, around the world. That means we got some in the United States. Okay, now if just 1% of those would go out and commit a terrorist act, that would be what? 100,000? Maybe a million? You know, I'm doing the math in my head. I'm not very good at that. It's taking zeros off of it. Again, not the sharpest pencil in the box. Never have been. But nonetheless, you see my point. There would be countless terrorist attacks. So that was all hyperbole. It was nonsense. And I'm not saying they don't exist. Don't get me wrong. But where did they all go? Did they just give up one day and go, okay, we're not going to do that anymore? You know, because we were told, if you remember, and George W. Bush told us that they hate our freedoms. Well, we're still here. And when's the last time you heard of a terrorist attack of any? Most of the ones that have been averted are ones that the FBI started. Okay, they went out and recruited somebody, talked them into doing something stupid, like blowing up I don't know, what was that one? They were trying to get some guys to go to a military base and shoot up the place, and these guys weren't even interested in it, and the CIA or the FBI tried to push these guys into doing it, and they didn't want to do it. So my point is that it's kind of rare for the most part. Same goes with this. End of the world scenarios. Come on, guys. You're doing that. That's clickbait. That's all it is. That's all it is. I mean, it sells. There's no doubt about it, but it's dangerous in my opinion. It's non-productive. Okay? And when you've got, and here's where it's gotten to, okay? We're making fun, and we're actually singling out Russians in the United States and around the world. Russians, people from Russia, maybe grew up in the United States, maybe moved here during the Cold War, maybe moved here after the wall fell, wanted to come to the United States. They're being singled out. Russia-Phobia, they call it. I mean, what, are you kidding me? This is the same thing we did to the Muslims right after 9/11. All useless. This is what we did to the Japanese after World War II. Why do we do that? Because we're told to. That's why. Because the media and anybody that has a microphone, who's looking for a reason to get people fired up, they want to make sure that the Russians are the bad guys. That's what they want. Nobody wants to listen to their maybe their case they're trying to make. No, Russians are bad. They invaded a totally innocent country on their border with they were not provoked. Yeah, that's nonsense, guys. It really is. That is not the truth of this. Now, here's where it really gets scary, is when you've got, now, I don't know this, Lavrov, I believe is his name. He was the ambassador to the UN for Russia for many years, and now he's a foreign minister. He said the other day, that the Third World War would be nuclear. Okay? Now, I think you and I both agree that was probably, goes without saying. Okay? But here's the thing. You don't say that, typically. You don't say that. People in positions of power do not say that very often. That's scary right there. Okay? That's really scary. Now, The fact that he had to say that, and the fact that now we're making up stories about Putin looks like he's put on weight. He looks like he's lost. He doesn't, he's pale. We can't find him. Apparently, no one knows where Putin is. Now, there have been stories that say that he's moved his family to Siberia and put him in a city out there that's dug into the ground, that's nuclear proof and all this. Whatever. I don't believe a word of that. Okay? That's not why he did this. If he wanted to do that, why didn't he just launch missiles and call it a day? That's what a madman would do. Okay? If you really want to get down to it, a madman would do that. That's what he would do. He'd go crazy. He'd push a button, and it'll all be over. It'll all be over. So that's not what's going on here. We need to listen to his bitches and his complaints. All right? And again, I'm no fan of his. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be a Russian. I'm not pulling for them. This isn't the Yankees against the Red Sox. I mean, I'm pulling for the United States at the end of the day. But you almost got to listen to this guy's, Russia's complaints, because they are pushed up against the wall. And that's the last thing you want to do to this guy. He has got some legitimate gripes. He does. They keep talking about the Minsk Accord, okay? The Minsk Agreement. And it was set up to hear the complaints and address those complaints of the eastern provinces that are mainly Russia's territory in Ukraine. These people did not want to be, it's like Crimea. Crimea did not want to be a part of Ukraine. They wanted to be a part of Russia, because for years and for generations they have been. Suddenly we drew this new border, and now we got to live with whatever the Ukrainian government comes up with. These people didn't want that. Okay, so they came to this agreement after 2014, when a democratically elected president was thrown out of office by the CIA and the likes of Victoria Nuland and the pro-war people in the United States under the Obama administration, by the way. They kicked him out, had a coup. They paid mercenaries basically within the state who are neo-fascist. I mean, they're Nazis basically, to fight a battle and put some pressure on the president so he would resign. And then we put the guy in there that we like. Okay? Russia's sitting there to the side going, hey, what's going on here? You can't blame him. It'd be the same thing that if it happened, let's say, for example, that Russia took over Mexico, okay? And they wanted to incorporate Texas into that. And they did, okay? So maybe the United States was weak at the time. They said, okay, and they took it. They took Texas, and now all of a sudden we want Texas to be all Mexican. We want them to be incorporated into the Mexican community, and these people in Texas don't want to do that. Okay, so the United States comes to the rescue and says, "Hey, you guys can't force these people to do this. They used to be American. Now they're in Mexico. We want that addressed. Okay, maybe at least the northern part of Texas needs to be seceded back into the United States." And Mexico says, no, you can go, tell somebody that cares. We don't care. All right? So we'd be a little miffed. And on top of everything else, what if the Russians decided to put nuclear missiles on the border, or even worse, in the state of Texas that we once owned? I'd be a little miffed. I would. And you could understand their point. You follow me on this? You can understand their beef. It all is based on perspective. And you got to quit listening to this endless crap of hyperbole and exaggeration that the networks are putting out there. You guys just stop watching cable news altogether. It is a complete waste of time, and that includes Fox News, okay? They're terrible. They're terrible. They're pro-war. You can tell it by the things they say. They're making this guy out to be some kind of lunatic. Lunatics don't get to his position very often without either being taken out, by their own people at some point, or, a coup of some kind. I mean, that's just the way it works. This guy has most of Russia on his side. They don't like this. And granted, they're paying a huge price for this, but I think they feel that if they don't, they're going to pay a larger price down the road. So again, I'm not trying to take his side. I'm really not. But here's the interesting part. You don't want, if Ukraine had nuclear weapons right now, Russia would have never invaded. Not a chance. Not a chance. We all know that. Russia's not going to invade France. They have nuclear weapons. Okay? They're not going to invade Poland. They're just not going to. Because they do in fact have nuclear weapons. Now, the problem is, what do you in fact tell the countries out there that are trying to, become part of the nuclear weapons community? I mean, for instance, Iran. Okay? What do you tell them? Say, oh, give up your nuclear weapons and you'll be fine. No, you won't, because I'll point at this and go, look what happened in Ukraine. They didn't have nuclear weapons. Russia invaded them. If we don't have nuclear weapons, America's going to invade us at some point. Guarantee it. And they would be correct. There's no deterrent. See, this is why it gets really ugly. No matter what you do in this position, you've got a downside to it. And the United Nations, give me a break. They have nothing to do with this. And NATO's a complete waste of time. Without Russia, NATO doesn't exist. It's that simple. This is all about money. It's all it is at the end of the day. NATO wants more money, and they want more people coming into NATO so that they can take money from them. And without Russia as the big bad wolf, the NATO doesn't exist. So I just want everybody to understand there's two sides to this story. And whether you agree with Putin or not, the fact remains that his story and his complaints should be heard at some level. And they haven't been. No one's paid any attention to him on this. He's been complaining about this since 2014, that this is going to be an issue. And he finally drew a line in the sand and said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. This is how we're going to handle this. Okay? So, anyway, that's all I got today. I just want to make sure we were clear on that, because we're going to be talking about this more and more, because this is some of the most interesting stuff I've ever seen in my life, and I am loving it. And I know there are people dying, and I hate that. And that is tragic that people are, because it's insignificant to these people. It's insignificant to Putin, and it's insignificant to the rest of the world. No one cares. They really don't. They try to act like they do, but they don't. At the end of the day, they really don't care. So, and that's sad. And it's usually the average guy that ends up paying the price in war like this. It just does. Now, one thing that they are saying, and I wanted to address this before I go, is that people are saying, oh, it's taking so long. It's taking longer than he expected to take Kiev. It's not working out the way he wanted it. And, well, that may very well be true. But, it took us 3 weeks, and this is the greatest military, apparently, or was. I don't know if it is anymore. But the United States has the greatest military in the world, okay, the most powerful. And it took us 3 weeks to get to Baghdad when we invaded Iran. So, I'm not saying to give the guy time, because, things happen. You got to change your plans sometimes. Things don't quite work out the way you thought they were going to. So you have plan B. And that's the way it works. Now, everybody's trying to act like this guy's a crazy man. I want to set the record straight on that. And I remember it distinctly from a movie in the past. It was called The Hunt for Red October. It starred Sean Connery and Alec Baldwin and Scott Glenn. And in one scene, I remember Fred Thompson. He was, I think he was a senator at one point. Anyway, Fred Thompson, I think he was on Law and Order. Anyway, he's on this aircraft carrier, and Alec Baldwin's telling him what he thinks is going to happen. And Fred Thompson, he's the commander of this aircraft carrier. He says, well, what's his plan? This is after Sean Connery stole a nuclear sub, okay? And they think he's gone rogue. And they're in his, I think his quarters is where it was at. And Fred Thompson looks at Alec Baldwin and says, hey, what's his plan? He said, well, I don't know. He said, Thompson goes, look, Russian generals don't take a dump without a plan. And he's right. They don't. If you think he hasn't figured out and looked at all the possibilities in this, you're crazy. That's exactly what he's doing. This may not be going according to his initial plan, but I got a feeling what's going to happen is they're going to annex everything east of the Dnieper River. That's what I think is going to happen. And they're going to just turn that eastern section of Ukraine either into a state of Russia or, I don't know, maybe its own country. I don't know. But I think ultimately that's where it's going to stay. They're going to go to Kyiv. They're going to kick the administration out, and they're going to annex it. I don't think Russia's going to go any further. They don't have the time or the money. They really don't. And they certainly don't want to deal with NATO. They just want to have that buffer zone between them. It's exactly what this is all about at the end of the day. Putin doesn't give a rat's ass about anybody in Donetsk or any of those breakaway states, but he doesn't like having NATO up against him. And that's what this all boils down to. We wouldn't either, okay? So anyway, that's all I got today, and I will be right back with the news.
If you think he's crazy, then what do we consider the rest of the world? You're listening to the Average Joe Podcast with Damon Gilbert.
All right, we're back. Let's see. Got about 10 items here I wanted to go over real quick, something you may or may not have heard. Florida legislature passes a bill banning abortion after 15 weeks, okay? Now, whether or not you agree with that or not really is irrelevant. The point is that I think it's probably just the beginning of the end of not Roe versus Wade per se, but this push for late-term abortions. I think once Florida does this, you'll see a lot of people following in suit. I'm sure this is going to be challenged in court and probably end up in the Supreme Court once again, but I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, because Texas and, Kentucky, there's been a couple of them already do this, put a time limit on it and make it the law of the land. So we'll see. Let's see. Faced with terrible results, leftists are backpedaling on some of the crazy ideas that they've had. Homelessness is one. DC's throwing them out of DC. They've decided to get rid of them. I don't know what they're going to do with them. Probably going to push them over into Maryland or Virginia would be my guess. But DC's had enough of the homeless. They're sick of it. And which I think is funny, because that's one of the biggest left-leaning areas you'd ever want to visit in your entire life, and that includes Seattle and Portland. And they're also, refunding the police. They've learned that that's not going to work. Defunding the police doesn't work. You got to have somebody in charge. I think that's a good idea. And they're also stopping the pandemic response. And they're one of the biggest lockdown towns or cities in the country. So basically, if you get right down to it, you've got California, New York. They're going to drop their mask mandate, I think the 15th of March. So basically, we're on the downside of this. We really are. Doesn't matter what happens. It'd be interesting to see what happens when we do some more research on this. Come 2022 in November, when hopefully the legislature will change its complexion quite a bit. We'll see if there's any push to find out exactly what really went on during this pandemic and see who were the bad guys in this. Let's see, number 3. Now, this is really what we're pushing for here is the government's ability to spy on you. Okay, that's what the lockdowns were for. That's what the Patriot Act was about. Just little by little, they're chipping away at your freedoms. And this is another example of that. A Rochester school district outside Detroit actually spied on parents. They compiled a dossier of social media activity and reported it to the parents' employers. Got a couple of people fired. Now, is this problematic? I see it as that way. What gives the Rochester school district the right to go in and look at someone's social media account and then report it to someone in their life? I don't understand who they thought they were saving here. It had to do with the fact that they disagreed with CRT, critical race theory, and some of the things that the school district was doing as far as mask mandates and that kind of thing. But to report these people to their employers, I mean, the fact that they were saying that we need to go out and march on this or go to someone's house and march in front of his house, I don't see a problem with that. See, that's what happened up in Canada. Canada's been locked down. They're under basically a dictatorship now. Trudeau has the ability to do anything he wants, as long as he can make it look like he's doing it to protect people. That's what tyrants do all the time. And it's coming here. And this is just a little part of it. Let's see. Democrats are saying that we need to fight Russia, and the way we need to do that is to buy oil from Iran. I've never heard of anything more ridiculous in my life. Weren't we upset about Iran here just a couple of years ago, right? Did they get better? Did they improve their American stance? Does the Ayatollahs they've toned it down a little bit? No, they haven't. They hate us as much as they ever have, right? But we're talking about buying oil from them rather than the Russians, right? It makes no sense. Buttigieg, our illustrious transportation secretary, said the other day. He said, "Look, the president has said that all options are on the table." He said, "But we also need to make sure we're not galloping after permanent solutions to immediate short-term problems." Okay? So he said this possibility out of the concern that about reviving the U.S. energy sector, it may retard the Biden administration's attempt to force Americans into relying on renewable energy sources. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that is nothing more than word salad. That is bureaucratic bullshit. Okay? Now, he's right on one. I mean, one part of this particular article is correct. What they're trying to do is they're trying to force Americans into relying on renewable energy, and that's not going to happen. Not in the next 200 years. It's not going to happen. So they've jumped the gun on this one. And Buttigieg, he's a waste of time. I've never seen a more useless politician. This guy was he the mayor of South Bend, Indiana? I don't think that's anything to write home about. And now he's suddenly our transportation secretary. This is the same guy that took 2 months off because he adopted a kid with his husband. Again, I got no problem with that. Whatever you want to do, I think it's wrong, but you do whatever you want. It's a free country. While we had supply chain issues out in Long Beach, which I think we still have. And nobody's addressing that either because, God almighty, the Russians are coming, right? Let's see. Biden's State of the Union address was the lowest rating in 30 years. That tells you all you need to know. And don't give me that crap that people were listening online. No. The same people that thought this guy was a good Joe, supposedly, are not watching him because they knew it was going to be nothing but nonsense. So, lowest ratings in 30 years. You can't make that up. Another one. New York City Mayor Eric Adams. They're telling him he needs to move faster to save New York City subways. I got a news flash for Eric. New York City's doomed. You might as well get out while the getting's good. That place is going to go sideways. There's going to be the extremely rich, and then there's going to be the poor, and they're going to be crime-ridden. It's just there's no way to turn this around. Not with the kind of policies that this guy's going to be forced to push through. Defund the police, all that. I mean, this guy used to be a cop too. It amazes me how quickly people can sell out. Let's see, number 7. Let's see. This is in quotation marks. It says, "I am a woman." All right. Now, this is the transgender UPenn swimmer. I believe her name now is Leah Thomas. She defends competing against biological women. And all I can say is, no, you're not. I'm sorry. If you have an issue with your gender, that's one thing. But you cannot stand up and say that I am a woman. You are not a woman. Unless you magically change your DNA and your chromosomal makeup, you are still a guy. Sorry. And you shouldn't be competing with women. Sorry. That is the end of that discussion. I don't want to hear anymore. That is not true. And let's see, what else have we got today? We got an interesting one here. It's my favorite politician of all time. He had something to say today, which was ridiculous. And that was Lindsey Graham. Yes, Lindsey needs to come out of the closet because this is not even funny anymore. And for you to come out and say this, he's calling for Putin's assassination. You're talking about a guy that couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag, a limp rag. He's a limp-wristed little insect, and I've never been a fan of his. And he's one of the ones calling for, he wants to go to war with Russia. That guy right there, Lindsey Graham, wants to do that. It's ridiculous what this guy stands for. But he needs to come out of the closet. He's got bigger issues than whether or not Putin needs to be assassinated. Never have liked that guy. Let's see, number 9. Airbnb terminates service in Russia. See, what did the Russians ever do to Airbnb, right? I mean, what do you think this is going to change the bottom line for the Russian country because Airbnb terminates its service? These people think they're a lot more important than they really are. And this is the kind of Russia-Phobia that I don't like. All right, this is ridiculous. Let's see also here, speaking of that, a man is ordered to leave a televised Q&A for expressing a valid point. All right, now this was on a Australian channel. They had 6 or 7 people around a round table. He just brought up the fact, he made the points that, and he did a better job of it than I did. But basically, it's the same thing. He wasn't defending Putin. He was saying, hey, you need to listen to this guy's story. Maybe we need to do that. And what do? They threw him out. They said, no, we can't have you here because you're pro-Russian. He said, I'm not pro-Russian. I am Russian. He said, I'm an immigrant to Australia. Been here for 20 years, 25 years. They threw him off anyway, okay? Why do they think Ukrainian lives are more important than Russian lives? I find that amazing. I really do. Because there are Russians dying in this too. So anyway, that's all I got today. I just thought I'd bring you up to date on all those. And we'll talk more about this tomorrow. This is, what is this, day 7 or day 8 in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. So we'll talk more about this. All right? And you have a good day. And remember, it's March 4th. And Joe Biden is still the worst president in American history. And by the way, he went to Delaware today. We're on the verge of nuclear annihilation. He goes to Delaware for the weekend. So I rest my case. So let's go, Brandon.
As always, thanks for listening to the Average Joe podcast. Be sure to check out our website at www.averagejoenation.media and follow us on social media. Remember, if you haven't told all your friends, you're wrong.